Okay, so my point is that authoritarianism in and of itself, I view as a moral wrong.
Well,
So
that
if you're
okay, well
saying that like, oh,
that's a claim that's
authoritarianism,
too much, man.
what's
Like,
that?
it's saying authoritarianism in and of itself is evil is silly. You can't
Why?
say, well, you can't say that if you have a king, they're gonna be evil.
Yeah, of course. Like Tito was better than Stalin.
No, I mean, you have benevolent kings who did great things for their nations. You had great
Sure,
emperors who did the
Charlemagne.
same thing. Yeah, just the
But what
idea
but what
that
happens when the
because you're
king
in a
dies?
that there's authoritarianism, it's evil is silly.
What happens when the king dies?
Well, usually there's some type of successorship, and this was
And
something.
isn't
Yeah,
isn't
go ahead.
history of monarchy and authoritarian societies effectively that even if you had a benevolent dictator or a benevolent king, there's oftentimes a piece of shit successor that fucks up the country?
That's no different than democracy.
All right.
So
I honestly, like for me,
that's the
that's such like
problem, right? Is like
a ahistorical anti-American statement. I just
it's
can't really
not. I'm
wrap my head
talking
around it.
about democracy right now. You think that
You
America was the
you
first
think you think that
democracy or what?
250 years of our democratic republic is as bad as like Nero
Yeah,
or Pol Pot?
do you think that, like, for instance, when we went through and we killed off all the Plains Indians, when we did all of these things, which you would perceive as being these horrible, unjust evils, that because the transfer happened from one person to the next person, that was how that was able to happen, just like these perceived evils you're talking about.
Yeah.
Intrinsically, systems of government themselves cannot really be evil. You have to be talking about the actions of people who are inside of these systems. That's what makes them evil. For
Okay,
instance,
I think when you
take communi
consolidate
hang
and
on, calm down,
concentrate power,
Connor, let
it's
me
more
make the
likely
Hold
point.
to
on,
be
Let me
Connor.
evil.
make the point,
Yeah,
Connor.
hold on, Connor.
Okay, so if you have a commune and they're all practicing communism, I don't give a and neither do you, right? If that's
Wait,
what
sorry, say that again because I
if
might
you
give a
have a
shit.
commune and they're practicing communism in the commune,
Sure,
nobody cares, right? And why would
right.
they care? And they're not and by the way, they could do a lot of good inside that commune and probably do, okay? The idea here for communism at a grand scale and for why that leads to evil outcomes has nothing to do with the system itself. Systems themselves can't intrinsically be evil. The thing itself is not evil. It's the actions done with it, like a gun. If you have a gun, the gun's not evil. The gun, it doesn't do anything evil or not evil. You do a thing which is evil or not evil with the gun. That's how that works. There's nothing intrinsic, though, that you can point to and say, well, authoritarianism is intrinsically evil based on what? How
Can
the
you
could you
think of
ever
any
make such a
positive
claim?
can you think of any positive examples of fascism or authoritarian communism? Or jihadism?
Well, wait a second. Like positives?
Yeah, I mean, you just said it's all ideologies are effectively tools.
Yeah.
It's how you implement the
Yeah, it could be the
ideology.
case, for instance, like
So
let's
hold
say
on, I just wanna
jihadism.
restate my
Yeah,
question
go
in
ahead.
case people didn't hear it. Can you think of historically any
Yes.
positive examples of authoritarian communism,
Yeah.
fascism, or jihadism?
Yeah, for instance, the jihadis who were attacking the Russians, right? Who put a jihad on Russia going into Afghanistan. From that proposition, it seems like they had the more moral proposition there. Wouldn't you agree?
Um, I wouldn't
Ah,
put them in as like a system
ah.
of government. No, but I don't yeah,
Yeah,
jihadists fighting communists is
yeah. So
probably
I mean, the
no,
thing
no,
is,
no, 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 Andrew, hold on. I don't want you to pretend that that's like a huge, like, unnuanced W, okay? Pitting a jihad what I asked you for a positive example of any of those
I just
ideologies
gave you
being in
one.
power. Yeah, no, 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 but you didn't say any example of them being in power. You said an example of good time in history was when one ideology was fighting the other ideology.
Yeah, so I'm giving you what I'm saying is that there can be within the system itself positive examples of how the system can be used for the good of whatever the people group is. And if that's the case, if you're talking
Okay, but,
about yeah, hang on. If you're talking about
uh
authoritarianism, I can give you many, many examples of great kings who did wonderful things in Byzantine Empire, for instance. Even Alexander the Great and what he did in the region that he conquered before he died. Like there's tons and tons in fact, the longest lasting civilizations were authoritarian, and the least longest lasting have been democracies and republics. They change their form constantly. So it's like, yeah, I don't, I'm not so sure that that when we have these interests, and yes, you look up the longest civilizations, they're all authoritarian. That's not a joke. And by the way,
Yeah, but you're also hold
let's
on,
point hang on,
you're
hang on. I'm just going
appealing.
to point this
Wait,
out.
hold on,
Like the
Connor.
Uh-huh.
systems themselves, I would not say are inherently evil. I think propositions of evil you have to attribute to men. Men are the evil doers or not evil doers, not
Wait,
systems.
so sorry. Jihadism, being the exclusive like advocacy for Islam to dominate a society and the willingness to use violence in order to affect that outcome. Um,
It can
can you
be
think of
that
like
can
a
be
positive
useful. Yeah, of
example?
course. If they, for instance, they perhaps they had a more oppressive people group or something like this, or they were being encroached on, and so they were able to bank on this, the idea of jihad, in order to protect their people group. From their
Like the
perspective,
Crusades?
well, from their perspective, I could see how they would see foreign occupiers as being a problem, and then they do jihad, right? And how that could be beneficial for that particular society. I don't know intrinsically that you could always make the case that this is bad. You see what I'm saying?
I would like to respond to this in depth, okay?
Okay.
So, and I'll try to be as brief as I can.
Okay.
So when you look at the history of the caliphates, Abbasid, Umayyad, whatever, the histories are typically of like expansion and conquest. And then what happens is they seize the territories that they're going to rule over for a long time. And then once a caliphate falls out of power, effectively like power abhors a vacuum. And so as a result, another caliphate comes in. But because um, especially concentrated power doesn't like to go down, there's a huge amount of violence between an authoritarian system changing hands with another authoritarian system.
Can
And
be.
you brought up Rome as an example where you were like, "Oh, well, authoritarian systems typically outlast. The longest empire in the world was Rome." Well, Rome was a republic initially, and then it
No, I don't think
became
that was the longest empire.
what's the longest?
I think that the longest unchanging empire was the Byzantine Empire. I think that that's the case.
Well, the from a historical perspective, you could consider them separate from Rome, but realistically, they're the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah,
So,
that's not
like,
the same though. That's not we're not talking about the same things there. So the thing
they
is
thought
like
of themselves as Roman, they just
but
spoke
you
Greek.
have to admit they were authoritarian is my point.
Okay, but what I was going to say though is that the Byzantine Empire and the Roman Empire in particular, and the Byzantine Empire is the Eastern Roman Empire, is that they had sure they had a dictator. I'll admit it, they had an emperor. I mean, literally Czar, Caesar. That's where the term comes from, and it comes from Julius, who was almost a contemporary of Jesus, and they lasted for another 1,500 years. So, arguably, as a political entity. However, what I would say within Rome, I wouldn't credit having a dictator or having a king with why they lasted so long. What
Either.
I would say is that they had a pretty rich culture that stretched back centuries or millennia into Greek antiquity. And they also had bodies like the Senate, rule of law, constitutionalism, literacy. They had a whole host of like civic virtues separate from an emperor that made their
I
society
think it was
great.
the virtues that made this society great. I agree with this.
Okay,
But the thing is though is that a
uh-huh.
lot of those virtues were from the top down. That's one. And another thing that you need to look at is that the systems themselves were not intrinsically evil. Now, maybe you can make a case for something like not even slavery necessarily could I make the case that that is an intrinsically evil institution because I can give examples of when perhaps during wartime you would need to enslave a certain portion of a public so that they could not continue to fight and wage war against you. I don't think intrinsically the ideas that we give these descriptors of systems are evil themselves, that the people who engage in these systems conduct evil actions or do not.
Okay. I'm still going to stand by the position that I think evil is more likely with concentrated power. So for instance,
That's
like the
not
whole
what you
argument
said
for
though. That is not
I
what you
think it is what
said.
I
What you
said.
no, and you can rewind the tape. Here's what you said. I
Uh-huh.
believe that these systems are intrinsically evil.
I think fascism
Intrinsically.
is intrinsically evil.
Why? What about fascism would be intrinsically evil?
Political corporatism and flexible authoritarianism.
That's
So
not what
political
about
corporatism.
that makes it intrinsically. What if you use that, for
I'm trying to
instance,
answer your question.
to feed the public and to assist your people group? What if you used
I
it
mean
for that?
that's what Hitler did, right?
Well, okay. So if it's the case
That's what
though,
Franco did. That's
yeah,
what Benito
yeah,
Mussolini
so
did,
what
right?
made it intrinsically evil? It was the actions
So
so which were external to the
I'll,
system.
I'll answer. So political corporatism treating the nation state as a body in an analogy sense.
Yeah.
And then flexible authoritarianism. I would say the flexible authoritarianism is what makes fascism evil because I'm a political corporatist.
Yeah, but
So
that doesn't you haven't
flexible,
made you've just reasserted the claim. It's a
yeah, I
tautology.
was about to explain flexible authoritarianism to you. Give me a
Okay,
second.
well, but don't make
Right?
it a tautology. Don't tell me it's evil because it's evil. Tell me how it's
Okay.
evil in
I'll
itself.
tell you how it's evil. So, flexible authoritarianism says that you get and maintain power however is necessary.
Okay.
So, effectively, like dog eat dog, Darwin rules. If you can get in there through elections, awesome. If you can get in there through appointments, awesome. If you can get in there through violence, awesome. However, you get into power is how you get into power. But then you also have to maintain power. And fascism effectively says that history and individuals in society are ultimately just a great struggle. And so if you lose in a fascist power game, it just means that you weren't the right person to rule. And so all it becomes is a massive struggle over power. And so as a result, since you don't believe in a constitution, don't believe in rule of law, don't truly believe in monarchy, don't truly believe in anything really, you just start worshiping power.
Well, gee, because Connor, I feel like you're just describing societies right now. You're just
To
describing
some
every society which exists right now, which is it's a dog eat dog world, and everyone's got it. They're all going for power, and however they're going to get it, they're going to get it because that's just society, Connor.
But liberalism in the classical sense, in the American sense, says that we are going to make rules to the game. That's what it
Original
says.
liberalism didn't even have term limits for the president. What the are you talking about? He could have stayed there for. Dude, he could have
You
stayed
think
there
the
his
Articles of
entire life.
Confederation
What do you
and
mean?
wait, hold on. You think the Constitution weren't rules to the game?
Well, the Constitution's a couple of pages, Connor. These
Yeah, no.
rules, the rules there were really designed as a compromise so that states could govern themselves. You know, the whole idea here that you're talking about,
Except for
and
the
within
supremacy clause in the late 19th century that said that you had to
also
follow the
not the
Constitution
original
even if you were a state.
Constitution, not the original Constitution, nothing to do
Wait,
with the
and didn't
original
every single state
Constitution.
have a representative body and a
Yes,
governor?
and they all
Yeah, so
ran no
didn't they have
different.
to agree to that rule set? Did they say that individual states could become monarchy?
This was part of the compromise. Well, a lot of them are run like monarchies. I actually, especially in the early part
By a
of the
governor and a representative body?
I
We're
don't think
seriously
you
gonna say
knew
that the
I don't think
governor
you
of
know how
Virginia was the
much
same as a
I
king?
don't think you know how much power governors used to have in these states, Connor. It was
Well, relatively
incredible.
speaking, I probably do.
Yeah, well, then you know that it was incredible in comparison to what they have now. It's not even in the same universe. And the thing
Well,
is
I would
that
also say
when
relate
they had the power of a national guard, when governors used to have the power of a national guard, that was an actual threat. Okay, it's maybe not now, but it used to be. And the thing is like, look, I'm sorry that you describe a dog eat dog world, but you haven't explained how that's intrinsically evil. Even if everybody's all vying for power and they all want it because they all think that they deserve it, and then the ones who deserve it get it, that in and of itself is not an intrinsic evil. You'd have to explain how the system intrinsically is evil. I would just argue easily that the morality base of the people group who have power are what make a system evil or not evil. Now, you can argue that there's some systems which maybe would turn out more evil people. I think that's a good argument, and I can get behind that argument. But I can't get behind the argument that a system itself, which is just a social construction of our brain, is inherently evil. That's absurd.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Then we might be using evil differently. So using evil, let me define it, I suppose, as like
Bad thing.
uh, propensity for intentional bad, intentional harm.
Yeah, but you see how that's tautological? Because you just say that bad is
How?
well, because then you're just saying evil is evil, right? So bad is evil, evil is evil.
But you understand, but you and I probably both, we probably have like 90% overlap, 95% overlap on bad, right?
No, I think that evil is the absence of the essence and energies of God, or the energies of God specifically. I consider that to be evil. So we have a different prism on what we consider evil to be. I think that when you say bad, you just mean things which are against your personal preferences.
Wait,
Um,
so hold on. So is a Christian more evil than an atheist
well, if he's a Christian,
non-pedophile?
he would you're giving it an incorrect descriptor. So this would be a person who's not partaking in the energies of God, which is why he's doing this action. So this action would be denoted as evil.
Okay, so hold on. So a self-proclaimed.
Yeah,
Christian
you can, but you realize that like
versus an
a
atheist non-pedophile.
self-proclaimed man or woman, right? It's like you can proclaim whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't make
yeah,
you the
but I
thing.
don't